Hello, chess fans. Welcome to another edition of Chess Chat, a program designed to give you, the viewer, a better understanding and a deeper appreciation of the exciting world of chess. I am your host, George Marajanian, Program Director of the Wachusett Chess Club at Fitchburg State College. This club meets every Wednesday evening from 7 to 11 in room C-188 of the McKay Campus School at the college. And with me, once again, is my longtime colleague and trusty co-host, Martin Lane of Lunenburg, one of the strongest and most active chess players in North Central Massachusetts. Welcome, Marty.
Hello, George. Good to see you again.
Always a pleasure seeing you, Marty. Marty, today we're going to focus our attention on the world's #1 chess player. That is, the highest rated player on the planet. And his name, Magnus Carlsen. Now, what do we know about Magnus Carlsen?
Well, Magnus Carlsen is, he's only 19. He recently achieved the top rating of all chess players in the world. He was the youngest player to do so at the age of 19. There's a picture of him now.
Yeah, with #1. He's showing that he is #1.
Right. And it was lucky for us, he just yesterday, as a matter of fact, finished first in a very strong tournament in the Netherlands, in Wijk aan Zee, the Chorus tournament.
Yes, so this is actually a super grandmaster tournament that's held annually in the Netherlands.
And this was the 72nd annual tournament, so this is one of the granddaddies of chess tournaments.
Yes, it is. Yes, the strongest players in the world, participate in this event.
So maybe you could explain how this worked for him. I mean, this isn't a tournament like we play weekend tournaments. This was, as you say, it was a super tournament with the top players in the world, and he was in a section with only just 14 players. The 14 top-ranked players in the world were in that, or most.
Well, this is a tournament which is divided into groups. Right. He's playing in the A group, the top group, and he played in this. You said he was 19. He's 19 years old. Well, in 2004, that is before he was still 13. He played in the C group, and he had become a grandmaster. He became a grandmaster at the age several months after his 13th birthday, which is phenomenal. Because when you think of other top players, such as Bobby Fischer, he became a grandmaster at the age of 15. And you had Garry Kasparov at the age of 17. And then you had people like Anatoly Karpov at 19. Well, they were older teenagers. Here you have Magnus Carlsen at the age of 13. And you know when he started playing chess?
He was in his first tournament. I understand he was 8 years old.
8 years old.
And he was an international master.
Look at now here. This is a book that was written by a grandmaster, Simon Agderstein.
Another
Norwegian who recognized the talent of this wonder boy, this wunderkind, and took him under his wings and taught him a lot. From the age of 8, and then shortly within 5 years after that, become an international grandmaster, having this award, being awarded this title by the World Chess Federation is phenomenal. So he has worked his way, and it's interesting. I think we may have a photo of Magnus Carlsen with his now personal trainer, Garry Kasparov. Garry Kasparov here on the right is
the retired world champion.
Yes, he retired from chess, but he has now become Magnus Carlsen's personal trainer, who probably will groom him to become the next world champion or a future world champion.
Well, in a recent interview, somebody asked Carlsen if he was eyeing the world championship.
Yeah,
and he was, I think he played it kind of coy. He says, well, I'm not really thinking about this. But earlier, last year, about a year ago, in another interview, he had said that his goal for this past year was to become the top ranked player, to have the highest rating. So now the next title, the only title and he's the world blitz champion already.
Yes, he won the title.
So the only title he needs now is to be the recognized world champion. So where do we stand in the world championship cycle? When would his next opportunity be?
Well, it's going to be a while because we have a world championship match coming up between Vishy Anand of India,
the current champion,
and against the former champion Topalov, Veselin Topalov of Bulgaria. That's coming up in a few months. So it's going to be maybe a couple of years before
he gets
Carlsen
his
will get a
chance.
chance. But he is destined to become a world champion if he keeps up this regimen. And he's been hot. He's
Well, since taking on Kasparov as his personal trainer, which has just been in the past year,
yes,
he's won a major tournament in London, major tournament in China, now this tournament in the Netherlands, and he also did really well at the Tal Memorial in Moscow. So he's beating all the top players.
Well, he's definitely on his way. Now, as we pointed out, he played in this tournament chorus in Vaikanze for the first time in 2004. In 2008, he was able to play in the A group, and he tied for first place with an Armenian grandmaster, Levon Aronyan. I think we have a clip from that tournament where he was interviewed prior to the start of the tournament. I don't know whether our director Darren Dame has that clip ready to go, but
Magnus
here he is.
Carlsen, welcome in Vaikanze. What do you expect for this tournament?
Well, I'm happy to be here, and I hope that I can maybe play some good games, maybe get the plus score, and have a nice time.
Is there a certain goal, a certain amount of points you're really hoping to get?
Well, as I said, if I make a plus score, I'm happy. And for example, a score like +2 would be great.
You did quite well also in the World Cup. So how do you consider your shape? Do you feel you're really in shape right now?
Well, my play in World Cup was quite good, but I was also a bit tired. So I hope I can play even better here, which is required because it's such a strong tournament.
Okay, and did you already find a local tennis club?
I think me and Peter Heine found something a couple of years ago, but we didn't really we didn't go there because we preferred to play squash instead.
Ah, okay. You're into squash. Okay, one more thing. What present did you get?
What?
What was the present you got?
Ah, this? Well, this said something about luck of your life. Well, I don't know exactly what it means, but sure it's heavy.
Okay. Good luck.
Thank you.
Well, that was a clip from 2 years ago, 2008, when Magnus was 17 years old, from the chorus tournament in the Netherlands, and he tied for first place. And again, 2 years now later, 2010, he has won clear first in one of the strongest chess players ever. So we're going to present a game, Marty and I, that Magnus played when he was 12 years old from the Norwegian Championship, in which he played a master. He at the time was a master because he's 13 years old.
He was already an international master.
International master, right? And Magnus is 12, and Magnus is white in this game. His opponent in this game is Stig Gabrielsen, a strong Norwegian player. And we're going to see how precocious a 12-year-old youngster such as Magnus is in playing against a more experienced player in the Norwegian Championship of 2003. So let's start this game. And how did Magnus start this game?
Okay, Magnus opened with taking the pawn on e2 to e4. Again, a very common opening, the most common opening there is. It occupies one of the key central squares. It opens up two critical diagonals, one for the bishop and one for the queen. It's an excellent opening move.
Okay. Now, in games we have presented in the past where we've opened up with e4, we have seen a lot of games where black has responded with e5, and that's a very common reply, a symmetrical reply, for the same reason that you cited for white, to open up the diagonal for the dark squared bishop for black to come out, and also the queen. But what his opponent, Gabrielsen, played, he played c5. Have we actually presented any games where c5 isn't played?
I don't recall that we have.
Yeah,
if we have, it was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. But what is this? Is this playable?
Certainly. It's probably the second most commonly played response to e4. So we give it the name the Sicilian defense, but maybe you could explain why.
All right.
Anybody would call it the Sicilian defense.
Okay, I can tell you why. Because well, this has been known for at least 400 years, this reply, C5, known as the Sicilian defense, because in the 16th century, the dominant chess players in the world were the Italians. And there were numerous Italian players and writers who wrote about chess. You had people like Gioacchino Greco, you had Pietro Carrera. Pietro Carrera, by the way, was from Sicily. He was a priest. Well, they wrote about this. They would actually include this defense in the books they wrote. In fact, there's a book by Carrera called Il Gioco dei Scacchi, where he points out this defense. So it acquired that name way back, in the 16th century, for actually Greco. Gioacchino Greco was the first one to say, hey, this is the il defensa siciliana. So it's that name has stayed with us. Wherever chess is played in the world, this is known as the Sicilian defense. So Magnus Carlsen now has to come up with his second move. What does he play?
Okay, well, this creates a little bit of an imbalance. When we see black responding to e5, the response is often to play the knight on g1 to f3 to attack that pawn. Carlsen plays the same move now, but for a reason he can't attack this pawn directly, but he does attack these two squares, and this d4 square is a critical square in this opening. Both sides try to fight for control of that area, and so he develops a knight, he puts pressure on the d4 square, preparing to play d4 when he gets the chance.
Okay, so that's a preparatory move for d4.
Right.
Now, what black can do here, black has several options here against knight f3. Black could play the d pawn, d6, that's one possibility. Right. Knight c6 is another good move. Even g6 with the idea of developing the bishop on g7.
Right, since there's no direct threat, black can choose whatever line he wants.
Or black can play a move that you like very much, a6.
My favorite.
Yeah, that's one of your favorites. But what was played in the game was e6. A good move for black.
Right. And it opens up the diagonal for the dark squared bishop. It prepares d5.
Okay.
It's a good opening. Now, the white has a number of choices. He could develop his other knight. He could play the knight to c3. He could. He could.
How about c3? Is c3 possible?
He could play c3
with the idea of playing
d4. He could play d4 right away if he wants to.
In fact, isn't that
probably the most common?
That's the most commonly played move is d4.
Right, and there are entire books written about these different variations.
All right.
What Carlsen chooses is something a little bit more obscure. He takes the pawn on b2 and plays to b3, which is fairly rarely seen. It's known as the Vesterinen attack, named after a Finnish master, international master.
Grandmaster Heikki? Oh, Heikki Vesterinen.
Right.
Yes.
He popularized it during the 1970s, and the earliest reference I've seen to it goes back 150 years in a single game between Adolf Anderssen and Louis Paulsen.
Back then?
Back in the 1870s, I think.
But I guess Vesterinen really popularized
it.
He
resurrected it and played it in a number of games. And then other grandmasters at the time, Kedes and others, picked it up and tried it as well. So
all right. Well, that's an interesting departure from the normal d4.
And a player would depart from some of the more normal lines as a way to maybe throw his opponent off balance. Something that's a little bit less studied.
All right. So what Gabrielsen did on his third move, he played b6. He still could play knight c6 or e, but he played b6. All right. Because he's going to deploy this white squared bishop here on the long diagonal. Right. But now, what did Carlsen play here?
Well, Carlsen could play the bishop to b2. That's the intent of b3, is to develop the bishop to b2, take hold of that long diagonal. But when black responded with b6, it really looks better to Carlsen and to a lot to play that take advantage and play this d4 right away. I don't know. It's hard to say whether he would have intended to play that had Gabrielsen chosen some other move. Would he have done it just then? I don't know. But
okay. All right, so what Gabrielsen did here, now he could have actually left that there because this pawn is defended on c5 with the bishop. I mean, he could have still played maybe a knight out to, well, that could be dangerous. To play the bishop immediately to b7. Right. But what he chose to play, he exchanged. He took the c pawn and captured on d4. So c takes d4 is the exchange.
And now white can recapture one of two ways. He could recapture with the queen.
But then the queen
but
would
then
come
it
under
could
attack with the knight c6.
Or even the bishop out.
Or even the bishop out, yes.
wanted to.
Well, be careful.
Yeah, oh, yeah, they're taking
because,
that. Yeah, we don't want that.
So, but the knight c6,
Right.
immediate attack would
Right.
be
So
dangerous.
you'd
So it doesn't make sense to
No.
bring out the queen early and subject it to an attack.
Right, we don't want to do that. So
right,
he
so-
played knight take pawn on d4, centralizing the knight, recapturing the pawn.
All right,
So now he's got a piece out, 2 pawns developed.
all right.
It's a quiet-looking position just now.
All right, so what black did here was play bishop on c8 to b7, attacking the pawn, the undefended pawn on e4.
Right.
All right, so now what does Magnus do here?
Well, the two more common responses, one is to play the bishop on f1 to d3 is a common response, but it's kind of passive. I mean, it really makes the bishop into another pawn. It does.
But it does prepare
but
for white to
it-
castle on the king's
So
side.
it does prepare castling.
Okay.
Okay, so that's one choice.
Okay.
A really kind of tricky choice that has shown up a few times is to take this knight and play it out to b5 with an eye towards that d6 square.
Oh, with a check.
With
Yeah.
a check. And
Okay.
that would really complicate things for
Right.
black. That's appeared in a few games.
Okay. So that was an option.
That was an option.
So what was played? What did Magnus?
So Magnus played something that looks a little odd. He took the queen on d1 and played it to e2, defending the pawn, but also thereby blocking in that bishop. So, but
that is strange.
But
looking.
it does have the advantage of that queen is facing down the king file. So he may be thinking ahead that if things open up, for instance, if black were to try to play d5, things start looking a little tricky.
Okay. So that is a rather strange move.
Right.
To put the bishop.
And we only
the
know,
queen-
and this is the only game that we've seen
That is
played
true.
it.
We
didn't
have not
find it
found any other game
in any of the
where white,
databases.
in this variation, has
Right.
played the queen e2, blocking the white squared bishop to defend the pawn here.
Right.
So what Gabrielsen did, he plays his knight on b8 and plays it to c6 and attacks the undefended knight.
Right.
All right. So now it's Carlsen's turn.
Yeah, Carlsen decides not to go for the complications of playing knight to b5. Now that this square is not.
Right. He
not
doesn't
defended,
control that. He doesn't control
it
that.
anymore. So
Now, he
and
could-
he doesn't really want to retreat. I don't
No.
think because
No.
that would just be like losing a move.
He would be, yes, he'd be losing time, losing a tempo,
So
we call it.
he goes ahead and he exchanges the knight. He plays knight take knight on c6.
All right. Now, black has a choice of recapture here. Black can either recapture with the bishop, bishop takes c6, still maintaining pressure on the pawn on e4, which is still defended,
And keeping the diagonal open.
keep
for
the diagonal open, or what was actually played is Gabrielsen took the knight with the d pawn. So the move was d takes c6. He now shuts off the bishop from putting pressure
Yeah.
on that e pawn by doing so. But he opens up the d
d
file.
file, and maybe he's hoping that he
Okay.
can double up with the rook and take control of that diagonal.
All right. So what does Carlsen do here?
Okay, then he takes the opportunity to play bishop to bishop 2, taking the long diagonal.
All right. Now, what Gabrielsen did here, he plays bishop on f8 to b4 check. Now, what's this all about?
Well-
this is an early check here.
It's an early check. Carlsen has a few options. He could just simply block it with the pawn if he wanted to.
But if he did that, he's actually
Now he's closing off.
closing
his own,
off the
his own-
diagonal. Does that make any sense to close off the diagonal like
no,
that?
no.
Where he put the bishop on a very nice. That bishop on b2 is on a very nice
diagonal.
diagonal, and also
Right, so
look, it's also threatening his pawn right now.
So he doesn't want to do that.
But he has to respond to this check.
Right, so he's not going to move. Well, he can't move his king. So he's going to block it with his knight. He's going to play knight to d2, blocking the check.
All right, so he blocks the check. Now black realizes. Now this bishop is threatening to take down here on g7
Right.
and would win this rook on
Right.
h8. So he has to block this attack. So he plays knight f6.
f6.
So knight f6. So now he blocks that attack. So what does Carlsen do
Well,
now?
now Carlsen, he's prepared. He's now prepared to castle. So he's going to castle queenside, which puts the rook onto d1. Now he's got the rook on the same file as the queen, threatening if he moves the knight, he's going to expose the queen to an attack.
It would force the queen to move.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So now black has to make a key decision here. removing this queen from this dangerous file. Now, he could play the queen over here, could play the queen to e7 with the idea of possibly playing the next move, bishop a3, and forcing the trade-off of these dark-squared bishops.
Right.
Also could be threatening just simply castle, either the king side or the queen side in this position. So that's after queen e7. But what Gabrielsen chose to do, he played the queen to c7. Now that's rather interesting to play the queen to c7.
I mean, it's on the same file as the king, so
right.
maybe he's trying to look ahead to a queen side attack. You know, castling king side and a queen side attack. But as it turns,
and then probably inviting white to say, well, if you want my knight on f6, fine. But you're parting with your dark squared bishop, which is not advisable for.
And this position would be full of holes if that.
It would be. All right. So what does Carlsen do here after queen c7?
Okay. So then he plays. He's going to open up that queen file. He plays knight to c4. Now taking another look at these squares here.
Okay. But right now, black actually still
controls
that square because of the, even with he's not going to come in here because the bishop and the queen control this d6 square.
Right.
What Gabrielsen does here, he plays b5, the pawn on b6 to b5, and attacks the knight.
Right. Probably expecting him to come back.
Yes.
To here.
He was probably anticipating the knight under attack is going to move.
So he could go up there.
But this is a surprise. The first surprise of the game.
He counterattacks.
So instead of retreating that knight, which is under attack, he now attacks.
He creates an
black's
attack of his own, right?
All right. Okay. And he certainly can calculate that if he takes this knight, if he just ignores this attack and just takes the knight on here, we follow this through.
Right.
If this pawn takes this knight on c4, this pawn is going to take this here.
No, he takes here first.
Okay. Oh yes.
And then he's simultaneously attacking the bishop and the knight.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So.
So one of them is going to go.
That's true.
And he picks up the extra pawn.
Extra pawn. So he wins a pawn. So that's why he cannot retreat. So we here. So what he does instead on e5, he just advances, takes the knight on f6 and saves it by playing the d5. Right. So knight d5 is his move. Right. So now what does Carlsen do?
So now remember this d6 square we've been talking about. Now he puts the knight onto d6 check.
So knight d6 check. Now the king, again, when you're in check like that, there are only three options to get out of check.
Right.
You either take the piece that's checking you.
Right.
You either block, but when you
can't block
with a knight. Anytime a knight checks, you never can block.
Right.
Or you move the king. Well, certainly black does not want to move the king and forfeit castle.
And by the rules of chess, you cannot castle out of chess.
That's right. So his choices are limited to just that one. He has to capture the piece that's checking him. So bishop takes on d6. All right. So that's
and if he had moved the king out, he would have forfeited his castle.
All right. So what Carlsen now retakes?
He retakes.
Okay. The pawn is attacking the queen. So what Gabrielsen did, he plays queen takes d6. That's his move.
That's his move.
So he's a pawn ahead here.
Yep.
Right now.
Right.
But not for long.
No,
so what does Carlsen do?
Carlsen recaptures this pawn on g7, attacking the rook.
All right. So now the rook only has one square to go to save itself, and that is rook g8. That's what black plays here. Rook g8, attacking the bishop.
Right.
So what does Carlsen do here?
Okay. Well, he doesn't have a really good way. He could defend it by moving the queen, but that doesn't accomplish anything. He wants to keep the queen where it is. He's got a rook in good position. He's going to come back and he's going to threaten the queen. He's going to play bishop to e5, threatening the queen, forcing the queen somewhere.
All right. So the queen is now under attack. So what the queen does is the queen now plays to a3 check. So queen a3 check, king under attack,
and I would be willing to bet that most players in this position would play king to bishop 1, defending the pawn, getting out of check.
Yes.
But what Carlsen does, and it's really quite clever when you look at how this game ends up, he takes the bishop that he just moved here and now moves it back to re-threaten the queen.
Okay.
Bishop to bishop 2, attacking the queen again.
And there's a reason why he did that.
Right.
Because
it opens up that line to the king.
Right. With the bishop on e5, he's actually
blocking himself.
Blocking himself.
Right.
But now he has gained time by attacking the queen.
Right.
And here is the losing move of the game.
Right.
What Gabrielsen did is he should have actually, the move he should have played was to bring the queen on a3 back to e7 to keep this file blocked, but he was greedy. His greed followed by taking the pawn on a2. So queen takes a2.
Right.
He's going to regret.
Well, I don't think so much that he was greedy. I think he just simply didn't realize the combination that's coming up. It looks to me like he's anticipating an attack on the queen side.
He's anticipating moving the a pawn.
A5 and coming down.
Right.
I think he just
So you thought this was in preparation for a queen side attack.
Right.
Okay, so what does...
I mean, he's got, he could move his knight. He's got all sorts of things he can do.
All right, so what did Carlsen do here?
What Carlsen does, a really startling move, when I first looked at this game, he plays rook on d1, takes the knight.
On d5.
d5.
Now...
And at this point,
Gabrielsen
resigned.
Now, we have to show our viewers why Gabrielsen resigned in the position. He's sacrificing what we call the exchange. The rook is a much more valuable piece than the knight. It's worth roughly 5 pawns,
right.
Where a knight is worth like 3.
Right.
So, and you see now, he cannot recapture with the e-pawn because of the pin. The queen is pinning this pawn.
As a result of that bishop coming back here earlier.
Right. So now the only move that would be allowable here to recapture...
Otherwise he would just be down a piece.
Be down a piece, and he doesn't want to be down a piece.
Right.
So he would have to take c takes... Let's follow this through. C takes d5. How would Carlsen have continued to win this game?
Well, now he would play queen take the pawn on b5, check.
Okay. All right, so now we have to move
Two squares.
Two squares. Yeah, actually we only
Three squares, I guess.
Well, we do. Let's say we make a run for it over here to f8. What happens if the king goes to f8?
Well, again, this bishop is on this diagonal, so the king is not going to go much farther.
Right.
The queen just comes over to c5, check.
All right, so on the check, now the king only has 1 square.
Right.
Which is king to e8. And how does white continue? How would Carlsen have continued if Gabrielsen had played this
Well,
way?
he could come bishop to f6, not a check, but there's an unstoppable checkmate on the next move.
Okay. So in fact, well, what? But if he moves the king to d7, will he?
Then he can bring.
Now he brings this
Right.
bishop has not been in play. Now that's under check, in check. So how does he continue here now? Let's say he has. Well, right now he cannot move the king, right?
No, the king can't go.
All right. So the only move to block the check is he plays bishop c6. All right.
And then he can take with the queen.
Right. Okay, now we only have, this is mate. This is mate. Right. So that would have led the mate if the king tried to make a run for it. Okay, let's see if we have time to show another way of winning this if he had gone the other way. All right, so on this, all right, so if he takes, the queen takes b5 check, the king cannot go to f8 because we saw the mate. Right. So let's actually go now king d8 and see how we continue this way.
Now he can do check this way.
All right, now he checks on f6, and the king actually has only 2 squares to go to.
Right.
Let's say he goes to king c7. How does that work out if we go to king c7?
Then the queen goes to c5 check.
Okay. Now, can we play, what if we block? Can we block? I mean, we can see what happens if the king goes to b8.
Well, then it's mate away.
Mate. That's checkmate.
Right,
okay.
bishop d.
So to avoid that, how about we just block this way? Is that okay?
Well, then you pile up onto the bishop with b5.
Oh yes, and this is going to lead to mate because he's going to win this bishop here.
Right.
The queen cannot do any checking because the bishop controls all the checking squares.
Right.
So you can see why Gabrielsen resigned after the sacrifice rook takes d5. This was an incredible game by a 12-year-old player who was very precocious and again is destined to be a future world champion. The way he's playing, #1 player in the world. His rating on the World Chess Federation rating list is over 2,800. This is a phenomenal player. We're going to hear more about Magnus Carlsen, this prodigy from Norway, a great player. Next time, we're going to present to you another great game from the world of chess on Chess Chat. Stay tuned. We'll be looking out for you.